Welcome to the debate. Most people think Visa and MasterCard are, the biggest banks in the world.
Right, which is a huge misconception. They actually aren't banks at all. I mean, they don't lend a single dime.
Exactly. They are the two largest, most lucrative digital toll roads on Earth. And today, we're looking at the ultimate test of two different financial philosophies playing out in this global payments duopoly.
Yeah, based entirely on their newly released 2025 Form 10-K financial filings.
Right. We're examining a core strategic disagreement here. In a highly consolidated global ecosystem, which company demonstrates the superior financial model and growth trajectory?
It's a fascinating split.
It really is. And I am going to argue that Visa's unparalleled absolute scale, their massive revenue dominance, and foundational network effects make it the unassailable leader. It's simply the superior entity.
Well, and I will contend that MasterCard's faster year-over-year growth rates, its incredibly efficient capital structure, and aggressive diversification into value-added services prove that it actually has the superior, forward-looking model.
Okay, let's lay the groundwork by looking at the sheer physics of Visa's operation in 2025. Because when you read this data, Visa's scale creates a moat that is structurally impossible to cross.
A bold claim right out of the gate.
I mean it. We're talking about a company that generated a massive $40.0 billion in net revenue. That's an 11% increase from 2024.
Right.
And $20.1 billion in GAAP net income. Out of 329 billion total global transactions carrying the Visa brand, Visa processed 258 billion of them directly on its own network.
Which is a staggering volume of traffic.
Exactly. By connecting nearly 14,500 financial institutions, 12 billion endpoints, and 175 million merchant locations, Visa is executing this network of network strategy.
Yeah.
With a staggering $17 trillion in total payments and cash volume, Visa isn't just participating in global commerce, it is the definitive foundation of it.
Okay, look, Visa is certainly larger in absolute terms. I'll give you that. But the 2025 filings reveal that MasterCard is structurally outperforming the giant on the metrics that actually matter for the future.
The metrics that matter. Like what?
Like velocity. Visa might have the gravity, but MasterCard has the velocity. In 2025, MasterCard hit $32.8 billion in net revenue, which is a 16% increase from the prior year.
Sure, starting from a smaller base, though.
But more importantly, they generated $15.0 billion in net income, which is also a 16% increase. Contrast that with Visa's sluggish 2% GAAP net income growth.
We will definitely need to talk about that 2% number.
Oh, we will. But the real clincher is the efficiency underneath those numbers. MasterCard achieved this massive profit on a tiny total equity base of just $6.5 billion.
Right.
They are generating an astronomical return on equity that proves their capital efficiency far outstrips Visa's traditional model.
Okay, before we get into the crossfire over that return on equity math, let's briefly ground this in how these highly profitable engines actually generate that revenue. Because, as we established, they aren't banks.
Right, and it's so important to clarify that.
Our listeners are well aware of the standard four-party model. The account holder, the issuer, the merchant, and the acquirer. But the crucial nuance is how Visa and MasterCard extract value from that loop without taking on the risk of the transaction itself.
Yet they sit entirely outside of the credit risk loop. If a consumer defaults on their credit card bill, the issuing bank takes the hit, not Visa or MasterCard.
Exactly. Think of them like global toll roads. They don't build the cars. They don't lend money to the drivers. They strictly pave the highways and collect a tiny fraction of a cent or, a small basis point fee for every single vehicle that passes through the toll booth.
It's brilliant.
It is. But what I find fascinating in the 2025 filings is how differently they are now categorizing those tolls. When you look at Visa's 10K, their toll collections are primarily categorized into traditional, volume-based buckets.
Right, the data processing stuff.
Exactly. You have data processing revenue, which brought in $20.0 billion, and service revenue, which brought in $17.5 billion. It's a clean, volume-driven highway. They are monetizing the sheer density of traffic.
See, I agree with the toll road analogy, but I come at it from a different way.
MasterCard's 2025 filing shows that they are building entirely different types of toll lanes. And honestly, the market is rewarding them for it.
How so?
Well, rather than relying solely on those traditional volume-based buckets, MasterCard categorizes its revenue simply as payment network, which brought in $19.5 billion, and then value-added services and solutions, which generated a massive $13.3 billion.
Okay. You're drawing a sharp distinction there, but let's be careful not to imply Visa is just laying static pavement. Visa's supplementary services are massive too, but the absolute volume passing over their network is what gives any added service its actual power.
Sure, volume helps.
It does more than help, and that brings us directly into the heart of the 2025 financial duel, right? Growth versus absolute scale. You look at Visa's $40 billion top line and $20.1 billion bottom line. Those numbers completely dwarf MasterCard.
In absolute terms, yes.
$1 billion in what they call client incentives.
That is a staggering amount of money just to maintain relationships.
It is, but you have to look at how that functions as a defensive moat. People think Visa just collects fees, but they are actually paying out nearly $16 billion in rebates to banks just to ensure those financial institutions keep putting the Visa logo on their cards instead of a competitor's.
Right, it's a retention cost.
Exactly. That is the cost of locking in the world's largest banks, which ultimately protects their $17 trillion in payments volume. It's a defensive moat so expensive that no startup could ever dream of replicating it. When you have that much volume locked in with $16 billion in incentives, your foundation is unshakable.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You call it an unshakable foundation. I call it a very expensive way to maintain the status quo.
Oh, come on.
No, I mean it. Static size is comforting, but growth velocity dictates the future. Look at the momentum here. MasterCard's net revenue grew by 16%. That's 15% on a currency-neutral basis compared to Visa's 11%.
Again, larger base for Visa.
But look at the bottom line. MasterCard's net income grew by an incredibly robust 16%. And then you have Visa, posting a mere 2% GAAP net income increase.
Hold on, I need to push back on the framing of that 2% figure. We have to clarify why GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, is the metric we are looking at here, and why it makes Visa's bottom line look temporarily sluggish.
All right, let's hear the accounting defense.
GAAP includes all the messy realities of corporate finance. So litigation provisions, the amortization of acquired intangible assets, restructuring charges. Visa's absolute past generation is still a roaring engine.
But the GAAP numbers are the official numbers.
Yes, but their 11% revenue growth on a base of nearly $36 billion from 2024 means an enormous amount of absolute new dollars entered their system. The law of large numbers dictates that percentage growth naturally slows as you get larger.
Look, I don't disagree that Visa generates a massive amount of absolute cash. But let's look at those client incentives again, because that is where the growth story really diverges.
Okay.
You noted Visa's $15.8 billion in defensive spending. MasterCard actually provided $20.5 billion in rebates and incentives in 2025.
Which is incredible when you realize MasterCard has a significantly smaller total revenue base than Visa.
Exactly. They are outspending Visa in absolute dollars to buy growth, to win partner loyalty and capture volume. Visa is spending defensively to protect what they have. MasterCard is spending offensively to take market share.
Yeah, but...
And it is working. It is resulting in faster top-line and bottom-line acceleration. They are actively capturing the new payment flows.
But at what cost? You're praising MasterCard for spending over $20 billion to capture market share, but Visa's sheer gravitational pull means they can maintain a larger network while spending less on incentives relative to their absolute size.
I wouldn't call $20 billion reckless. It's targeted.
Well, Visa's $15.8 billion in incentives against $40 billion in net revenue is a much healthier ratio than MasterCard spending $20.5 billion to reach $32.8 billion in revenue. Visa's scale gives them operating leverage that MasterCard simply doesn't have.
I would argue that MasterCard's operating leverage is actually vastly superior, and the proof is in the efficiency of their capital structure.
Here we go.
This brings us to the starkest contrast in the entire 2025 Form 10K analysis.
return on equity. This is the metric that shows how much profit a company generates with the money shareholders have invested.
Right.
MasterCard generated $15.0 billion in net income on a total equity base of exactly $6.5 billion. We are talking about a return on equity that is mathematically staggering. It's well over 200%. They are running incredibly lean.
Sure, on paper.
But they required a massive total equity base of $37.9 billion to do it. The capital efficiency of MasterCard's model vastly outstrips Visa's.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on this ROE math. Wait, we need to unpack how a company making $15 billion in profit only has $6.5 billion in equity on the books. Because that is not just operational magic.
It's good management.
It's largely financial engineering. When you look at MasterCard's cash flows, they returned $17.6 billion to stockholders in 2025. That includes $11.7 billion in stock repurchases and $2.8 billion in dividends.
Yeah, returning value to the owners.
But we have to explain the mechanism here. When MasterCard uses its cash to buy back its own stock, that equity effectively disappears from the balance sheet. So naturally, the profit they make is being divided by a much, much smaller equity number. It mechanically inflates the return on equity.
Calling it financial engineering makes it sound deceptive. It's actually perfectly optimized capital allocation. I mean, why hold on to capital you don't need?
Because when you are the foundational infrastructure for $17 trillion in global commerce, when you process 258 billion transactions across 200 countries, you need a balance sheet that projects absolute stability.
But they don't take credit risk.
Visa holds $37.9 billion in equity because they maintain what we call a fortress balance sheet. It signals to central banks, governments, and financial institutions that no matter what macroeconomic shock hits the system, the Visa network will clear and settle transactions. Visa's equity isn't lazy. It's a structural necessity for the world's primary economic engine.
Okay, but a fortress balance sheet is only useful if you actually have a reason to deploy the troops. Both of these companies, as we discussed, operate with virtually zero credit risk.
That doesn't mean zero systemic risk.
True, but they don't need to hold massive reserves against loan defaults like JP Morgan or Bank of America. So holding on to nearly $38 billion in equity is arguably lazy capital allocation.
Lazy? Wow.
MasterCard realizes that because their network requires so little capital to maintain its core function, the most efficient thing to do is flush that excess cash back to the shareholders. It's the ultimate proof of a flawless business model. A toll road that practically runs itself, generating massive free cash flow that can be handed right back to the owners. Why trap capital in a fortress when you have no credit exposure?
Because the toll road doesn't just run itself. The idea that these are static networks is a relic of the 2010s. There are continuous, massive technology investments required to keep that network secure and ahead of the curve.
Right. Of course they invest in tech.
And that fortress balance sheet isn't just sitting idle. It's exactly what funds the technology required to keep the network relevant as payments evolve beyond just swiping a plastic card.
Well, I am glad you brought up evolving beyond the swipe, because this is where MasterCard's value-added services really shine in the 2025 data. And it's where that offensive capital deployment is making a huge difference.
Let's talk about the services layer then.
We are moving away from simple authorization, clearing, and settlement. MasterCard's value-added services and solutions revenue was up 23% to $13.3 billion in 2025. And look at what they are doing with their capital to drive that.
You mean the acquisitions?
Yes. In December 2024, they completed the $2.7 billion acquisition of Recorded Future, a global threat intelligence company.
I found that acquisition fascinating because Recorded Future isn't a payments company at all.
Exactly.
This wasn't about processing payments faster. It was about integrating AI-driven cybersecurity directly into their network. MasterCard is fundamentally transforming from a traditional payment network into a holistic digital security, identity, and data platform.
They're definitely branching out.
They are structuring vast amounts of unstructured data, digital identities, threat assessments, open finance data, and they are using it to power generative AI models for their clients.
They are embedding themselves so deeply into their customers' fraud prevention and real-time decisioning workflows that the payment itself becomes just one small part of the relationship. They are selling enterprise solutions now.
Look, that is a very compelling pivot, and MasterCard has undoubtedly built a strong services arm. But you are ignoring the fundamental law of data analytics.
Which is?
The best insights, the best AI models, and the best security solutions come from the largest data sets, period. Visa isn't ignoring the services layer. Their data shows they are scaling it just as effectively.
They are growing it, sure.
Visa's value-added services grew by 24% in 2025, reaching $10.9 billion. But the real differentiator is how Visa's sheer scale acts as a force multiplier for these new technologies.
How so? If MasterCard is acquiring dedicated AI threat intelligence, how does Visa's raw volume beat that?
Because AI is only as smart as the data it trains on. Visa processed 258 billion transactions directly on its network last year. That translates to an average of, over 700 million transactions every single day.
That is a lot of swiping.
The sheer density of the data Visa captures on global commerce outpaces everyone else, and they are opening up that data in highly structured ways. Take their investment in their Model Context Protocol, or MCP server.
Right, they highlighted the MCP server heavily in their technology updates.
Yes, and we should explain what that actually means for the network. Visa is essentially creating a highly secure, standardized sandbox. It allows external AI systems from banks and merchants to interface directly with Visa's intelligent commerce APIs without compromising the underlying security of the data.
That's a clever integration play.
It's massive. They aren't just selling a proprietary AI tool. They are becoming the foundational data layer for everyone else's AI. Furthermore, look at Visa Direct. They processed over 12.5 billion transactions on Visa Direct alone for more than 650 partners.
And Visa Direct, for our listeners who might just think of it as a card feature, is their push payment system. It's moving money directly to a bank account or a digital wallet, bypassing the traditional merchant settlement delay.
Exactly. It's real-time money movement. And they have built the connectivity to reach approximately 12 billion endpoints globally.
Right.
When you deploy a new value-added service, whether it's an AI fraud model or a real-time payout feature, across 12 billion endpoints and 175 million merchant locations, the network effect makes that supplementary service inherently more powerful than a competitor with a smaller footprint. Visa's absolute dominance in consumer payments, the massive $40 trillion addressable consumer spend out there, is what feeds the engine.
I understand the scale argument. I really do. If you have the most data, your models should theoretically be the sharpest. But MasterCard's approach to diversification is highly targeted at the specific areas where the most lucrative growth is happening right now.
You're talking about B2B.
Exactly. They aren't just selling to the traditional issuers and acquirers anymore. They are capturing new payment flows entirely. Look at the velocity in their B2B operations. MasterCard's total payment network revenue grew by 12%, but their cross-border volume grew by 18%.
Okay, cross-border is always a high-margin play.
Right, and they are zeroing in on commercial invoiced payments, B2B marketplaces, healthcare, global logistics.
But B2B payments are notoriously fragmented. I mean, you're dealing with different ERP systems, complex invoice approvals, and crazy cross-border regulatory hurdles.
Which is exactly why it's such a massive opportunity. By focusing on modernizing disbursements and remittances through MasterCard Move, they're aggressively expanding into the spaces where traditional card-based payments haven't fully penetrated. They're solving the friction in corporate finance, not just consumer retail. It is that agility, unencumbered by a bloated balance sheet, that allows MasterCard to pivot and scale these value-added services so rapidly. While Visa is leveraging its massive gravity to hold the center, MasterCard is using its velocity to capture the perimeter. The high-margin, complex data and B2B flows that will define the next decade of commerce.
Well, to summarize my position in light of our discussion today, when you parse from these 2025 financial statements, Visa emerges as the immovable pillar of global commerce. Their absolute scale is simply unmatched.
It is huge, yes.
Generating $40.0 billion in net revenue and over $20 billion in net income,
while managing a fortress balance sheet of $37.9 billion in equity, provides a level of systemic stability that no competitor can replicate.
I still say it's lazy capital, but I hear you.
They are spending nearly $16 billion defensively to lock in the world's largest financial institutions. Their network connects 12 billion endpoints, and the sheer density of processing 258 billion transactions creates a data moat that makes their AI and value-added services structurally superior. That gravitational pull ensures that as commerce evolves, Visa will inherently capture the majority of the value. It is, quite simply, an unassailable model.
And my summary comes back to the undeniable power of velocity and efficiency. MasterCard's 2025 filings show a company that is structurally outperforming the giant. With 16% growth across both top-line revenue and bottom-line net income, they are undeniably the faster-moving entity.
Faster but smaller.
But look at the ambition. They are outspending Visa in absolute dollars on incentives, over $20 billion, to aggressively capture market share and drive that growth. By utilizing a highly efficient capital structure that flushes excess cash back to shareholders, generating $15.0 billion in net income on just $6.5 billion in equity.
Right.
And by aggressively pivoting into high-margin enterprise-level solutions like cybersecurity and AI data structuring, MasterCard proves that its strategic model is perfectly optimized for the forward-looking digital economy.
Well, what we can absolutely converge on is the fact that both of these companies operate what might be the best business models in modern corporate history.
Oh, absolutely. The four-party zero-credit risk model is fundamentally brilliant. The toll road doesn't bear the cost of the goods or the risk of the driver. It just collects the fee. And both entities are massive beneficiaries of the ongoing secular global shift away from cash and checks toward digital payments and seamless money movement.
I completely agree. Whether you prefer the gravity and massive data advantage of Visa or the momentum and capital efficiency of MasterCard, both 2025 filings reveal highly lucrative businesses capitalizing on the digitization of money. And frankly, the speed at which both are evolving from simple payment networks into complex digital infrastructure platforms is remarkable. There is, of course, much more to explore within the complex regulatory, litigation, and strategic sections of both 10K filings, which we highly recommend digging into.
Yeah, the filings are packed.
We will leave it to the listener to decide which financial model truly wins out in this duopoly. As you look at the architecture of global commerce, you have to ask yourself, do you want to bet on the irresistible pull of gravity or the unstoppable force of velocity?